Hello, family. Hi, family. My name is Vusi Timberwayo.
And my name is Michael Hinton. Call me Mike.
Yeah, Mike. You call me VT. We're very excited to talk to you guys about our upcoming book called The Underdogs. Mike, we've been working on this book for, 5 years now?
About 5 years, yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember how the whole conversation started about doing the book?
I do, actually.
Remind me.
I do. So I got hold of you through a little app called Twitter back then.
I remember.
And we got chatting, and I came to see you, and I've got a finance background and love business. And I remember the original conversation was, why do South African companies, some of them do well when they go offshore, and others not so much? And we can name a few of them that have done extremely well, and others just crash and burn offshore and in Africa, actually. And I think we got to chatting around it, and we thought, okay, and this concept came about, maybe some of them are under the radar, maybe they are underdogs. And I think that was my recollection.
I recall the same thing, but a different lens. So, and by the way, I think there's still a book there. I genuinely, I think there's still a book about what are the mistakes that South African companies make going into the rest of Africa. And you could infer from that, what are the mistakes that companies that come from more developed markets make when they go into emerging and frontier economies?
I was going to say, it's not just South Africa. It can apply to American companies that come to
South Africa.
And possibly to South America. Some of them do really well, others not so much.
And I think there's a lot of learnings there. So I recall you and I were having the conversation. I think at the time, it was Woolworths that was taking a beating in Australia with David Jones business.
With David Jones, correct.
Yeah.
I think they came in 2014.
That's right.
With a value, there was a telephone number.
Yeah.
And I remember that we were both admiring the guy from David Jones who carried on pushing it, and he got to a serious number. And we worked out what the goodwill was on that. And at the time we said, geez, I think they've overvalued this thing. And it turned out to be right.
One of the things that really upsets me is that you and I have these conversations and we don't record them. So you said, like, I think, and the reason I say that is because there's, perhaps for the people watching this, the need to understand that by the time we get to the point where we're presenting something in either a book, a keynote, a research paper, we've actually done the technical work behind 100%, it, right? Like we've quantified it. And so to your point about David Jones, then you recall we also had the conversation about ABSA going into the rest of the continent, their Barclays thing.
Yes.
And then of course having to fold that back. And we were just like, there's definitely a lesson here about how these guys should be operating. Now, the way I remember it is we had that conversation, and then I think it was one of those like Friday meetings over Zoom or something, and you and I were having this conversation, and we went, actually, what might be part of the problem is that because the structure of the South African economy is such that the companies that dominate markets are large companies that have existed long before many of the leaders who run it today were running those businesses, that a lot of the leaders in South African businesses today don't know how to be underdogs.
100%.
Right. That the idea is that if you're a CEO of a bank today, and I say this with all the respect, CEO of a bank, an insurance company, a retail business, an agricultural produce business, you're in logistics, distribution, supply chain, even in ICT, right? It's most likely that the market you're operating in is oligopolistic. So you're one of 3 or 4 other players. You've been dominating that market for 30, 40 years. And if you're losing market share, you're kind of like switching sandwiches with each other.
That's true.
But when you get into these frontier markets, you very quickly realize like your competitive environment is not this big Gaussian thing with a long tail. It's like, it's a big competitive streak, right?
Yeah. And back to your point about the banks, if we have a limited number, even the people that work for them, many of them have hopped from a red bank to a blue bank, to a green bank, maybe back to a blue bank, maybe back to a green bank.
And that's, by the way, that's one of the issues I think that stifles innovation, is because for a lot of these very large industries that have tons of capital they can deploy into innovation, the HR functions tend to be, revolving doors. So I know this because they're clients of mine. I go and work with a particular bank. 5 years later, when I'm at the different bank, I'm talking to the same guy. I go and
100%.
Work at a particular law firm, right? Then
I've done the same
3 years later, exactly. And then you get there like, weren't you just at,
Yes, hello, right? My email address has changed, but I want you to do the same thing.
and so when we talk about innovation, the reality is that for a number of these organizations, their innovation window only extends as far as the exposure of the executives making those decisions. And if those executives have not operated in markets, environments, or spaces where they've been really challenged around how they think about business, suddenly they're in trouble.
So we've got this group of farmers that have got together in New Zealand, and it wasn't that long ago, actually, less than 50 years ago,
that
have got together and formed this co-op called Fonterra. And I had to go back and actually check these numbers. So not only do they do a turnover of over $20 billion with a B, dollars, they also, take a deep breath, do 30% of the world's dairy export.
My God.
30% comes from this tiny little island with atrocious weather most of the year round. That's on many maps, doesn't even exist. That's the power. Those guys are ultimate underdogs. What do they say? We can't do it on our own. Not only that, but we have to get our stuff out there. So we've termed it the little engine that could. And that's one of the things.
Sorry, as you're saying that, let me interrupt you. So as you're saying that, you know what I'm hearing? I'm hearing South African stock fails.
100%.
Why aren't South African stock fails able to do a similar thing? Today, as we speak, there is an issue in South African township markets about what's happening with businesses that are selling products that are illicit products, that are fake products, that are harming consumers. And if you talk to any of the old school retailers, general dealers, when I was growing up in townships, who are running these general dealers, they would tell you, yeah, but I'm a small little general dealer I can't compete with. And what I've just heard you say is here was one farmer and another farmer and another farmer who thought about themselves as a sum total and recognized that a sum of the parts is much bigger than if they operate 100%. Individually. So what are we 100%. Missing? Why aren't we doing this?
I'm not sure, but you'd be a fool to be a New Zealand dairy farmer and not be part of that co-op.
I get you.
Why would you? Same thing. How do we get, and I think it's something that the banks have been longing for forever. How do they get all these stockpiles together? It's a great question. Is it a matter of trust?
Yeah. You know, speaking of trust, one of the examples we reference, which I want to talk about very quickly, is Ari.
Right? Tell me about Ari.
So Ari is... it's an incredible story, but I want you to picture the world circa late 1800s Europe, right? And today, you know, one of the challenges we have in the world is we tend to see, when we read about something, we see it through the lens of today, not what it was. So a lot of people are not aware of this, but Europe in the late 1800s was prehistoric. Like most of Europe was what we would today define as rural. It wasn't like towns and fancy. There were no, there wasn't locomotives or trains or heavy industries.
You just had the car. You just had the vehicle. It was exactly industrial, like revolution, but only just.
I mean, I was just in Birmingham, as you know, and a lot of people are not aware. But the Midlands, as they call them, right? Birmingham, the areas that is the Midlands, that entire part of Britain was where the Industrial Revolution comes from.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it actually only started in the late 1910s going forward. So if you're in Europe in the late 1800s, you are in rural area. You're not, there's no, and so today when you think about a company like an Ari.
Tell me about Ari. A-R-R-I.
So it's A-R-R-I. So these two guys, one born the year prior to the other, 1886, 1887. They happen to go to the same school. They become friends. August Arnold and Richard Richter, right? And so they grew up in this place called Germany. You might have heard of it. And they come from like what today we might classify as like a lower middle class income house. And they have a love, but like an absolute love for art. And so they get into art and they love art, et cetera, et cetera. This is around the time there was another group of guys called financieri in a place called France who have started taking stock images and converting them into rolling image. Many years later, we'd come to know it as cinema. So if you've ever taken a piece of paper or a series of papers and drawn the same image but created the illusion of movement and then flipped it, that's what they were doing.
Just before Walt Disney.
Just before then. So the French are like leading, right? But these guys in Financieri Lumiere that are doing this, they're doing it, but they're doing it not only for moving images, but for still images. They then create a technology of still image that grains the image and gives us the first instance of what today we call color film. So these guys go, we're going to focus on static film. The Ari guys find out about this technology and they're like, we're going to start scaling and building this. We're going to start using this technology, but we're going to focus on motion film. This is important. When this is happening, They start competing with another company you might have heard of, small little company called Fuji.
Fuji.
Coming out of a tiny little island called Japan. And then they compete with another company, tiny little company you might have heard of called Kodak.
Kodak.
Coming out of a small little country called America.
I've heard of them.
So basically, the RE guys are getting into making motion type of technology, competing against the two largest economies going into the 20th century.
Yeah.
Basically, let me put it another way. World War II started when America and Japan got in a fight.
That's true.
Okay, so RE gets into a marketplace where the companies they're competing with is an American company and a Japanese company. This is a big deal. So they start competing. And here's what RE does. RE says, we could focus on so many other things, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to focus on making cameras for directors of photography. The guys in this room shooting this aren't aware that the lenses they're using and probably the camera technology they're using is RE tech. So when you start watching movies like The Godfather, that iconic scene where the old Godfather is holding the cat and is stroking it like so. The reason the camera could pick up the grain of light and the detail was because it was an RE camera.
Amazing.
Now, RE has a struggle for the first couple of years, but they're insistent. They build a business for the niche. What's the niche? The director of photography. Now, for that business to grow, they need directors of photographies to be a growing profession. For that to happen, Hollywood has to grow. So basically, their entire fortunes are pegged to the growth of a single industry. Kodak, Fuji, and several others make stills. They make all sorts of other things. They make printers. And so they diversify. RE goes, we're going to focus on our niche.
And can you imagine there was a lot of pressure for them to have a look at what Sony, what Fujifilm were doing and going, should we be going that?
100%.
Should we be going in that direction?
100%.
They didn't.
And the lesson there is one of the things that underdogs do is they don't pick a fight they can't win. But once they've picked a fight, like a pit bull, they don't let go. Right. So this starts early 1900s. The RE family and the RE business doesn't have a real breakthrough until the late 1960s. Which means you had to have a generation worth of work, 60 years worth of work, committed to building a business where you're competing with far greater competitors, with far more resources, who have much more money to spend on technology and innovation in other growing spaces. And you choose to say no to the glowing trinkets and say, I'm just going to focus on this. So check this out. The reason today Marvel can make the kind of movies that it makes, and MGM Grand and Paramount. The reason today you can watch a James Bond, a car goes underwater in that iconic movie with Roger Moore, where he's driving the Lotus, and the Lotus goes underwater. That was shot with an RE camera, because RE then started making cameras that could allow the directors of photography to create vision and execute it, which means the camera had to operate underwater. Then they started making lights that had to operate underwater. And to get really, really smart, here's what RE did. They said, whereas our competitors sell actual products, we're going to sell our products as a service line. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to gearing houses, what they call gear houses, right? We're going to go to gearing houses, equipment houses. We're going to say to them, you can buy an RE camera, or you can lease an RE camera, and lease an RE lens, and lease an RE light. And we're going to put you on a 20-year lease, and every 3 years, you can get the latest technology innovation. And that then begins to build their business and their balance sheet.
When did they do that? That must have been revolutionary for them.
It was, yeah. So they did that first in the late 1940s.
Wow.
And then they really accelerated that business model towards the end of the 1960s, beginning of the 1970s. And here's what really will blow people watching this away. As we speak, RE is still private. No intention of going public. And their whole reason, when I was reading this, their whole raison d'etre was, we just want to operate like the underdog. I'm almost sure the fact that we know the story and we just put it on the internet is probably going to piss somebody off there. I'm almost sure they're like, damn, now people know.
Now they're going to check us out.
But today, if you're making a movie and you want decent quality production, whether you're making a movie or a studio set or a game show or any of the things that you and I watch, you're probably using an Alexa. You know that rig that you've seen people move the camera? That's all RE equipment, right? All of that stuff is RE equipment. Those jibs where you see the jib come into a studio and flight up and flight down. Or in the most recent movie, Bad Boys, there's a scene where Will Smith is shooting somebody and you can see the camera following him around. He's literally wearing the camera as a harness. That's all RE stuff. The reason when you watch directors of photography, they've got these little things they hold like this, where the hand will shake, but it doesn't translate into the image shaking. That's all RE stuff.
And remind me where Kodak is at the moment.
Yeah. and so I think, again, the point there, which is one of the points we highlight in the book, is that there is a particular temperament to being an underdog. Yeah. And the most important part of the temperament, which I think it's almost universal. You and I were talking about this the other day. Notice how there's no rock star CEOs. They just do the job. They get the gig done. They create a disproportionate amount of shareholder value, and they don't need the fanfare. They just execute on the work. Talking about shareholder value, talk to me about the sports team that has this incredible amount of shareholder value and yet has never won a Super Bowl.
So there's it's not never, but there's a sports team in the US called the Green Bay Packers.
Right.
So I want to take you to the US, to middle USA, and you go past Chicago, and there's a place called Minnesota. I think it's Minnesota.
Yes.
And we go up all the way, and you've got the lakes on your right-hand side, and you drive and you drive and you drive. And there's an NFL team called the Green Bay Packers over there. Now, to give you an idea, the size of Green Bay, the town of Green Bay, is less than 100,000 people.
Wow.
It's 100,000 people. But the Green Bay Packers are the only, not only NFL team, but the only American sports team that's owned by the community.
Wow.
So what they did, they got together and, again, spread it out to the community base. Now you think about Jerry Jones. So Jerry Jones owns the Dallas Cowboys.
Yes.
Dallas Cowboys, we think about the famous the Cowboys cheerleaders.
Yes.
We think about the star.
Yes.
We've been to Dallas recently.
Yeah.
What a place.
Yeah.
Here's
massive stadium.
Dallas Cowboys is the world's most valuable sports team by far.
Really?
By far.
Wow.
Is the world's, according to Forbes last year, world's most valuable not football team, sports team.
Wow.
Here's the thing you might not have known. The Dallas Cowboys have not been in the Super Bowl for 27 years.
Wow.
They have not appeared in the Super Bowl for 27 years.
Wow.
So this is another thing we were going through is does money and value equal titles? Certainly not in their case. Kansas City Chiefs have won three of the last 4 Super Bowls. They're not even in the top 20. So what is it about this Green Bay, who, by the way, won the Super Bowl not so long ago? What is it about Green Bay that they've managed to avoid having the superstar owners, having the billionaires wearing as a badge of honor, and yet they are the true underdogs? Yet you cannot get, I think if you wanted to get a ticket or a season ticket to Green Bay, it's something like you'd have to wait 300 years with the waiting list they've currently got at the moment.
Wow.
So every single game is chock-a-block. Minnesota and this, I think it's the states of America, they're very well known for beer and they're very well known for cheese. And the Green Bay Packers supporters are called the cheeseheads.
Yeah, because they
remember that.
They
got those little cheese things on their head. I think it's to keep their ears warm because it's so freezing over there. But just an amazing story about how well they've done, considering they don't have the billionaire owners, and it's part of the community. And that's one of the other traits that we've got of this underdog is having this community focus over there.
Or as the way we reference it in the book, the village never leaves the child.
It never leaves the child.
The child can leave the village.
Exactly.
But the village never leaves the child.
And we've got a few of those examples which we won't go into today.
Oh.
But it's amazing. Think about, and I'm sure people can think about where a lot of these businesses have started and how many of them are still true to their values.
So as we wrap this conversation, I think, we started this process 5 years ago. And I always say to people who say to me, shouldn't you be writing more books and publishing more often, that the way I look at it, and I might be wrong here, but there was just a certain amount of maturation, of distillation that it takes to produce something worthwhile, right? So the reason a diamond is worth what it's worth is because it takes as long as it takes under the elements that it takes for a diamond to be created. Of course, now they make them, they can manufacture them, but that's a separate conversation altogether. So I think, we started this process 5 years ago. A lot of people watching this won't even know. We gave up a couple of times, lots of frustrations along the way. Then we just stopped on the process. Then we came back. And there was something about the process that just kept pulling us towards the execution of this book. And for me, what I'm excited by is I'm excited by the opportunity to present a new school of thought along what it takes to lead and what it takes to dominate in an environment where you don't have the natural set of skills and tools to lead and dominate. And then, the most importantly, what it really takes to build something multi-generational. Yeah. Because if there's one theme that comes across for sure, across all of the underdogs we reference, we've spoken about 3 here, we've got 15 in the book, is that they are all multi-generational.
They are. And the other interesting thing that I was going to say to you is we did start this process 5 years ago. Those stories are all as relevant today as they were 5 years ago. And because of this multi-generational story, I'm really hoping that in 50 years' time, they'll be as relevant as they are today.
Sorry, I want to just double click on that point because I think it's a very important point. If you think about the number of companies we were celebrating just 2 years ago, it was 2 years ago, the world was talking about, the amount of value Sam Altman had created at Altex. 3 years ago, we were talking about this coffee company giving Starbucks a run for its money in China called Luckin Coffee. Luckin Coffee's dead. FTX is dead. And so when we were doing this book, one of the things we were really, really intentional about was finding the thing that's not on trend, finding the thing that's not on fashion. And it's said differently, it's like finding the real, true, deep values of what it actually takes to build something long-term and sustaining.
100%. There's another story in the book about a little company called Peloton.
That's right.
That was huge during COVID.
Yes.
And had a market cap at one stage of $54 billion.
Wow.
Where are they today? They're still around, but they're competing with another company, which we've mentioned in the book, that's I believe is a lot more timeless. Because why? They're focused on the right things.
So, family, we look forward to you getting your copy of Underdogs. Mike, we've got to make sure we get these books out there.
We do. The time is ticking, mate.
And we're going to hit the road and we're going to be doing some book signings. And we're very excited. So make sure that you hit the link below, join the wait list. I think the last I checked, we're at 5,000 people. Can you believe it, on the wait list? So that's a crazy thing because in South Africa, bestseller status is 3,000.
3,000, yeah.
So what you and I should do is we should go and change our Twitter profiles to bestseller in advance. Put it in advance.
It's the best-selling book that no one's read.
That's good. All right, guys. Yeah. We'll see you soon. Make sure that you hit the link below, and we're going to be on the road with them very soon.
Love the session. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, bud.
Cheers.